All right, I'm back. Sorry, the video cut off because apparently the memory was all used up on my computer. And so I am back. This is the second part of the Bakhtin lecture. So, what I had talked about when the last video cut off was that a major insight of Bakhtin is that he questions the passive role of audience in traditional rhetorical theory. So if we're teaching rhetoric to our 101 students, right, we'll say, here's the rhetorical triangle, the rhetorical situation. It's a graph of that situation. And there's three components that form that situation. There's the speaker, the message, and the audience, right? That's what we would say traditionally. But Saussure is pointing out that the force of the audience is not acknowledged, is not fully acknowledged, and that we said that every utterance is fundamentally responsive. And if that's true, right, then everything we're saying is a response to a previous utterance, right? Which means the audience, our audience now, is in some way producing, generating the utterances that we make, right? And this is kind of obvious in the sense that, you offer appeals or claims that you think a particular audience will find persuasive. So you look at the sort of person you're talking to, and based on your understanding of their type, what type of person they are, you're going to tailor what you say to in such a way that you think it would be enticing or persuasive for the kind of person you're talking to, okay? But Bakhtin, you can tell I've been reading politics. Bakhtin gets into this a little bit deeper. And this takes place, I'm looking at 1232. He says, still current in linguistics are such fictions as listener and understander, who are partners of the speaker, or the unified speech flow, and so on. These fictions produce a completely distorted idea of the complex and multifaceted process of active speech communications. Courses in general linguistics, even serious ones like Saussure's, frequently present graphic schematic pictures of the two partners in speech communication. There's the speaker over here who speaks to this listener, the person who perceives the speech. And they provide diagrams of the active speech processes of the speaker and the corresponding passive processes of the listener's perception and understanding of the speech. One cannot say that these diagrams are false or that they don't correspond to certain aspects of actual whole speech communication. I'm sorry, let me say it again. One cannot say these diagrams are false or that they do not correspond to certain aspects of reality. But when they are put forth as the actual whole of speech communication, they become a scientific fiction. The fact is that when the listener perceives and understands the meaning, the language meaning of speech, he simultaneously takes an active, responsive attitude towards it. Now that's huge right there, right? And this is what he's getting at with the responsive aspects of all communication and its iteration, right? This brings up some problems related to agency, right? And to the power of the speaker as an independent agent who rationally reflects upon what he thinks or she thinks and then speaks it, right? It shows that in some ways extrinsic factors like audience and message are unconsciously influencing the things that you say and do. Okay, so Bakhtin really dissolves this traditional dispensation and says it shouldn't be graphed as if these are poles, right? In fact, they're mutually constitutive, all right? And then he goes on to further define these concepts that he's introducing, particularly the utterance, and he says that the utterance is not the same thing as a sentence. They're not the same thing. Utterances and sentences are two different things, okay? And so he says that the sentence is a unit of language. What's the smallest unit of language? Well, the smallest unit of language, as we learned from Saussure, is the sign, the word, right? The word. And what a sentence is a semantic, logical grouping of words or concepts in such a way to signal a general belief about reality, right? So I say, it's hot out today, right? When I look out the window, it looks hot. I did that by putting together some words, and there's rules that something has to abide by in order to be considered a sentence, right? It has to have a subject and a verb. It has to have a predicate, right? These kinds of rules. It has to have a punctuation mark at the end, and it has to be a particular punctuation mark. It can't be a comma at the end. It's got to be a period or a question mark or an exclamation point. Okay, so the sentence is a unit of language. Bakhtin tells us that the utterance is a unit of speech communication. Speech communication. And so there are two different considerations, right? Now, can a sentence be an utterance? Yes, it can, right? But not all sentences are utterances. All sentences are part of an utterance, right? But the singular sentence may not be the whole of the utterance. Well, what then determines what is the boundary for the utterance? And he says three things. Three things that define, help us, show us what the utterance is and where it begins and ends. First, I'm going to erase the sentence part here. Does it say enough to elicit response? This is the first thing that an utterance has to do if we're going to call it an utterance. Does it say enough to elicit a response? If it doesn't, well, then it's probably not a complete utterance. It's probably part of one, right? According to Bakhtin, in order for it to be an utterance, it needs to say enough that a response is possible, because the iterative, responsive dimensions of communication are of central concern for him. Okay, the second concern is, has the speaker said what she intended to say? Has the speaker said what she intended to say? Now, in a sense, you might say, well, look, the speaker has always said what they intended to say, right? Because you wouldn't speak if you didn't intend it, right? But then you could say things like the example that I had just a few minutes ago, where I called Bakhtin Biden, right? Well, I did say it, right? But I didn't intend it, right? And yet, it's an utterance, it's a statement, right? What I made. Actually, really, truly speaking, this whole video is a single utterance, and we'll explain why. What Bakhtin really means here, of whether the speaker said what she intended to say, is, did the person say everything they meant to, right? Did they get to complete their message? And so, for example, the video cut off, my last one, in the middle of it, right? Well, that didn't count as an utterance, right? Because I hadn't concluded, right? I hadn't had my opportunity to finish the whole statement, the whole utterance. And this one, right, this video that you're watching now, the second one, is equally not a full utterance in the sense, because what I wanted to say, part of what I said at the beginning, got cut off and is now in another video. If I had the editing skills, and I don't, to bind together these two videos, right, then we'd have the utterance, because we had everything that I intended to say, right, the complete message, Okay. Now think about how that might work in looking at oral discourse or interpersonal discourse. How do we deal with interruptions, right? Have you ever interrupted somebody because you thought they were done, but they weren't done? And they say, no, I'm not done, right? And in other words, you thought that they had said what they intended to say, but in fact, they're saying, no, I've got a bigger point than that. And this links into the third consideration that we use to judge utterances. Does the utterance enact the finalizing routines of the genre? Okay, so the third thing is that the utterance, if it is an utterance, will enact the finalizing routines of the genre. And so these finalizing routines, what we mean is like in a letter, if you're writing a personal letter to somebody, you don't just say, I went to the grocery store on Tuesday, right? And then you fold the envelope up and fold the letter up and lick the envelope and put it in, right? Instead, you finish it up and say, well, I hope I'll see you soon and that everything's going well with you. In the meantime, the family sends their regards. Love, Adam, right? Or whatever, right? Those are the finalizing routines of the genre of the personal letter, right? What are the finalizing routines of a video lecture? Finalizing routines would probably be, you'll see me kind of sum up the points that I wanted to make today, and then I'll say something like, and that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I hope you have a great day. See you next week, right? But I'm not doing it truly right now, right? I'm just performing what that might look like, okay? And so, does the utterance enact the finalizing routines of the genre? Now, you can notice that both 2 and 3 here have to do really with questions of intent. How do I know if a person's done, if they've said everything they intended to say? Well, in theory, I'll know because I'll see them signal the concluding or finalizing routines of the genre. But the ability to see those things presumes that I've identified the right genre, that I know what genre they're acting in, which is to say that I know what their intention is. I know what they're trying to do. We know what the function of the genre of a resume is. And when we see the document signaling those conventions of that genre, we'll know when it ends, right? Because we know the genre. And so this is a source of miscommunication, right? When we're not sure of what genre somebody's operating in. And we can also point to how important genres are, in that you've seen somebody try to enter into a certain genre or make use of a particular genre, and if you know that genre well, somebody who doesn't might stand out, right? And so this happens a lot of time. I look at all the applications to our graduate program in rhetoric and composition. One of the things you have to do to apply is to write a statement of purpose, right? And statements of purpose in applications to graduate school have a very particular form and content, right? And when somebody sort of defies that topical content, or they write a statement of intent, right, that doesn't look like other ones I've seen, this person is signaling to me that they might not really fully be in the know about graduate school and how it works, because they don't know the genre here. And when we don't know the genre, or when we mistake the genre that somebody is operating within, that's when miscommunication can begin sometimes. So the utterance, the idea of speech communication, these are the major insights that Bakhtin has for our study of rhetoric, and I think probably most importantly, are the ideas that he sort of blurs the line between speaker and audience, or speaker and listener, and recognizes the iterative, responsive nature of language, and that every utterance, every single unit of communication that meets each of these standards, right, while we can block it off and study it as an utterance, right, we have to also recognize that that utterance is a response to other factors outside of the utterance. Okay, and so, like I said at the beginning of the last video, whereas some people who study language are concerned with the structure and the rules of that language, others are concerned with meaning making. Again, Bakhtin shows us a different set of concerns, a concern with the socio-cultural dimensions of language use and how they can be studied. If you got a final essay topic where you're analyzing some instance of speech, right, Bakhtin's ideas might be useful for you in deciding how to cut up particular conversations or dialogues. All right, so that's Bakhtin. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day. Go out, inhabit some genres. Bye-bye.